Yeah, I mean, I think what RISE offers 21st century learners globally, and obviously specifically in China, when we talk about RISE China, it really then really speaks to what RISE is. And RISE is an amalgam of, rigorous pedagogy and an approach to teaching that's founded upon all the best principles of what we've learned and what we've been world leading in for the last many years, combined with the disruption of technology. I mean, a 21st century learner, first and foremost, is a 21st century student and a 21st century child. And I think the things that we need to understand is 21st century kids, they just compute and they communicate and they process information in a very different way to the way we do. And it would be irresponsible of us not to understand that. I mean, you can see new media, social media, and traditional media are all moving in that direction. And any responsible education company needs to move its own medium in that same way. So, I mean, I think what RISE does very well is we use technology in a very engaging way from a child's perspective, but we use the technology in a very data analytical way from an administrator, from a teacher, and from a parent's perspective. And yet, it's all captured in a very rigorous, holistic, pedagogical environment where ultimately it's all about sound teaching, sound learning, and the proof of the pudding's in the eating. I mean, the success of our business, first and foremost, is based upon outcomes. I mean, the beauty of an education business, and I've been leading education businesses for many years now, is it's not about salesmanship, it's not around, cute branding, it's not around a fast-moving consumer good that you can market extremely effectively. It's about a rigorous approach, combining all of the things I've talked about in a very engaging, disruptive way, but then ultimately measuring it and proving it by virtue of the outcomes. And I think that's really been the self-perpetuating success of our business in China. I think that technology plays a critical role in all learning. Again, your question is somewhat specific to China, but I think it's important to remind ourselves what sits inside of EMPGI. I mean, EMPGI is a global education business. It's a digital education business. It's obviously run by people like myself and the team who built up Houghton Mifflin Harcourt to becoming the world's largest education company. But in our new venture here in EMPGI, we're not burdened with being kind of, prejudiced or biased towards pushing textbooks or pushing data tools or pushing any particular product set. We're coming at this global marketplace with a commitment towards, doing it best practice 21st century way, from a learner's perspective and from a teacher's perspective and from a parent's perspective. And so for me, it would be a folly to talk about doing that without technology being at the epicenter of it. Technology, however, is not the silver bullet. Technology is an enabler. I mean, technology has transformed global medicine. It has transformed the way a hospital functions today versus 20, 30 years ago. Well, the same thing needs to happen to both public education across public school systems around the world, as well as to private education for parents and consumers who want to supplement their child's public education by getting them involved in after-school or supplementary programs, which is obviously what RISE is. But again, sitting inside of EMPGI, we've obviously got RISE in China and in these various other markets that we can discuss in due course. But we've also got a public education business where we are very much trying to lead the policy debate and ultimately implement best practice around how big public education systems around the world can embrace these best practices from around the world in a very open way, so that if you're sitting in America, you shouldn't be resistant to best practice from Finland or from Singapore. You should be open to that, and vice versa. RISE's approach towards our student base has been quite systematic, and we don't apologize, extremely structured. And we think, frankly, that's been the key differentiator of our business in China versus a lot of very fine, small little indigenous Chinese education businesses that have started over the last several years. In the end of the day, we've brought international best practice, an enormous wealth of product and expertise, but very much tried to localize and customize that to the indigenous needs of our consumer, being the student. And so I guess if you put all of that into plain English, what does all of that mean? That means that ultimately we started at a very early age group. And we started with pre-K kids and really trying to teach them English in a very immersive way, again, with the rigor and the pedagogy of how you teach a second language well, but also in a dynamic, engaging way where we engage these kids. And frankly, as a result, I think what we've been doing very successfully is teaching these kids social skills and leadership skills and confidence as much as we've been teaching them transactional English. Not just esoteric, vocabulary-based grammatical English, but actual user-friendly English. So to me, it's kind of the first step on the road to, whether it's Harvard, Princeton, Yale, or LSE or wherever they want to go to college, we're giving them that first step. But importantly, our commitment within RISE is to now grow our product set and go up the age group so that we can teach our kids as they get into middle and high school, so that we can teach them to get ready for the test prep, for whether it's GMAT or SATs or GCSEs or wherever particular syllabus they're studying towards, the IB market, etc. But the whole commitment we have is with the same rigor and the same structure to actually grow with our students from an age profile perspective, and then ultimately get them to the point where they're then ready, able, equipped, and hopefully then with the success from a credentials and from a marks perspective, to being able to get admitted into college, be it in the States or anywhere else. Because I think you've got this very interesting dichotomy today where Chinese kids are making up the largest constituency of foreign students enrolling in American colleges, and indeed that statistic applies to most international college markets just by virtue of the population. Chinese kids are growing quicker than almost any other student body in terms of foreign enrollees in these colleges. However, the very interesting data point for me is they have very high dropout rates. And to me, that's an extraordinary statistic, because if you think about these kids, they've dedicated their lives, as young kids and as teenagers in the pursuit. And it's not just their parents' pursuit. Everybody likes to be a little flippant about this tiger mom phenomenon. In the end of the day, the child buys into that as much as the parent. We've all got teenage kids, or I certainly do, and I know you can't force a teenager to do anything they don't want to do. So these kids commit themselves to the pursuit of getting into college. And yet, there's this statistic where almost 40% of them across the world are dropping out. Why is that? I think fundamentally it's because they've developed a lot of skills that helped them to get into university, but what they never got was a holistic understanding and immersion of the culture that they're about to enter into. And that's as much, it's a national culture, so it's understanding the culture of the college, where you're going, i.e. America, Australia, the UK, etc. But it's also the cultural nuance of what it's like to live on a campus, what it's like to be surrounded by other kids of similar age groups, to be in a multi-gender environment, to be in a multi-ethnic environment. And those are all things that I think go into a holistic preparation of a child to get into American or other universities. So again, my overriding point being, it's not just about ticking the boxes, writing the great application, getting the great GMAT or GPA. It's actually about doing all of those things combined with the more intangible side of your skill sets that you're going to need to survive and ultimately prosper in that society. Yeah, we're very proud of what we've achieved in China, and I think the reason why we've been successful in China is because first and foremost we listened to our customer, and we researched very heavily what they wanted before we entered the market. And I think also the way in which we entered the Chinese market was, and it's a golden principle of how we'll enter any market, with the appropriate level of humility, where we will bring what we think are our core competencies, but we will always do it in partnership with local operators. So again, in China, I think we were very successful because we brought all of the pedagogy and all of the US educational leadership and all of the products and all of that expertise, but ultimately we matched it up very closely and off the back of research and off the back of working with our local partners to exactly what we felt the market wanted. And ultimately that's led to, as I said, this blended approach of combining best-in-class innovative technology, disruptive educational tools, but with deep traditional rigorous pedagogical approach built around sound curriculum, and then ultimately all of it packaged up, managed, delivered carefully, and ultimately assessed, and the outcomes ultimately speak for themselves. So with those same principles, we've kind of looked at other markets where we believe, you've got the same underlying growth drivers as you have in China. And so there are obvious neighboring Asian markets where we believe a lot of the same business and education needs apply. So those markets, specifically markets like Vietnam and South Korea and Thailand and Indonesia, we believe, again, all of those are Asian cultures where there is this huge propensity towards, after-school education, towards wanting to supplement their child's public education, towards ultimately wanting their child to go to international school, towards understanding that education is the ultimate way to break out of any socioeconomic class. It's the ultimate leveling tool from a societal perspective, and those are at a social level things I applaud, and I applaud greatly. But from a business perspective, having done the research around a lot of these other countries, we believe the same underlying both growth, business and education drivers exist. And to that end, that's why we're going into each of Vietnam, Thailand, South Korea, and Indonesia. Then more broadly, we believe that we have products that for early age learning that really allow us to think about more broadly a broader kindergarten offering. So we're designing a full kindergarten offering, and we hope to launch that later this year in several markets in the Middle East where, the kindergarten market we believe is underserved, particularly with best-of-class technology combined with education. And so applying the same rigors of how you run a kindergarten, rather than it just being a daycare center for children, it's an early education center for children. So applying those same principles, we hope to get into the kindergarten market in places like Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, and other countries across the Middle East. And then furthermore, with the broader product set that we have inside of EMPGI, which of course is the parent company to RISE, we have a lot of products that we believe have an appropriate place to be sold into the public school system. So we're setting up a sister company to RISE Global, which is going to comprise a lot of my old team from Riverdeep, some of the leadership team from HMH, some of the best-in-class products out there, which we want to package up into a full systemic ecosystem of best-in-class product and service, which we can then sell into the public school system. Because my own personal passion is really driving systemic reform around education, and ultimately the way in which you can drive systemic reform is at a central level. I mean, and the best way to engage at a central level is ultimately at ministries of education. And that's why we're in dialogue with many ministries at a national level, everywhere from Panama City in Panama and Central America, where I was recently, through to several big districts and urban centers in the U.S., places like Miami-Dade and Broward County and Atlanta Public Schools and the State Department of Education in Georgia, all the way through to some dialogue that we're leading with ministries across the Middle East, like in Qatar and in the United Arab Emirates. So these are exciting times for the company, but more importantly, forget about the company. These are exciting times in education. I think since 2008, and a global financial crisis ensued, the likes of which none of us have seen, and hopefully won't be seen for many more years to come. I think it's really just put a big question mark beside the whole value proposition of how to deliver best-in-class, affordable education to the masses. And the good news is that's in many ways marginalized a lot of the people who've resisted that change. Bluntly, people like the teacher unions across the world. And I think it's forcing a whole new debate around public education. Technology obviously means that parental intervention in a child's public education system can no longer be resisted. The internet allows a parent and demands that a parent be allowed to engage in their child's education. And frankly, parental involvement has been shown to be an absolute cornerstone to good education. So things like parental involvement, things like 24/7 education, things like connecting the school and the home, connectivity, broadband, PC to student ratios, the proliferation of cheap devices, smartphones, tablets. There's a whole kind of big policy debate happening at a hardware level, at a middleware level, at a software level, all sitting inside the cloud, which now means that technology is no longer just kind of a sideshow to global education. It is absolutely the epicenter of how you can change the value proposition. And to that end, we're seeing the results of all of that, and we're hopefully leading it very much as a policymaker sitting in the middle of that debate.